The scream pierced the desert dawn like a blade through silk, raw and desperate enough to make Cole Brennan's mare sidestep beneath him. He'd heard men die in the war, heard women weep over graves, but this was something else entirely. Something that made his scarred hands tighten on the reins until leather bit into his palms. Through the heat shimmer rising from red rock and sage, he saw her. The Apache woman hung suspended between two cottonwood trees, her wrists bound with rawhide that had already drawn blood. Dark hair fell like a curtain across her face, but he could see the proud line of her shoulders, the way she held her head high, even as Chief Mateo raised the bone-handled knife again. The Comanche war chief's followers formed a loose circle, some watching with hunger, others shifting uncomfortably. Cole had seen enough torture in his 32 years. He'd promised himself he was done with other people's wars. But something about the woman's silence, the way she refused to beg, made that promise crumble to dust. 3 months earlier, Cole Brennan had bought a patch of scrubland 30 miles south of Santa Fe with the last of his army pay and a prayer that isolation might finally quiet the voices in his head. The voices of men who died under his command at Antietam, at Gettysburg, in a dozen nameless skirmishes where boys became corpses and heroes became haunted. He'd built his cabin with his own hands, raised a few head of cattle, and spoken to no one but his mare, Duchess, for weeks at a time. The neighbors, what few there were, called him the Hermit of Dead Horse Canyon. They meant it as an insult. Cole wore it like armor. The 1875 New Mexico Territory was no place for a man who flinched at sudden sounds, who woke screaming from dreams of cannon fire. But it was perfect for a man who wanted to disappear. The desert swallowed secrets like water, and Cole had plenty of both to spare. He'd ridden out that morning to check his water rights. Again. The drought had every rancher within 50 miles eyeing his little creek like vultures eyeing carrion. What he'd found instead was smoke rising from the old Apache gathering place, the sacred grove his grandfather had told him to respect when he'd gifted Cole this land 20 years ago. "Stay clear of the spirit trees, boy," the old Jicarilla chief had wheezed on his deathbed. "Some places belong to the earth, not to men." Cole had kept that promise until now. Now, watching Chief Mateo's blade trace delicate patterns of blood across the copper skin, Cole knew some promises were meant to be broken.
The Comanche war party numbered 15 men, their faces painted for death, their ponies restless in the growing heat. Cole recognized the type, raiders who'd been pushed west by the cavalry, taking their frustration out on anyone they could find. The woman wasn't Comanche. Her buckskin dress, the silver and turquoise at her throat, the way she held herself, even in pain. She was Apache. Probably mescalero from the cut of her clothing, which meant she was a long way from home. Chief Mateo spoke in rapid Comanche, his voice carrying across the desert like a snake's hiss. Cole caught enough words to understand. Prisoner, revenge, slow death. The woman's village had apparently killed the chief's son in a raid. Now he wanted payment in kind. Cole could ride away, should ride away. This wasn't his fight, wasn't his people, wasn't his problem. He'd spent 3 years learning to mind his own business, to let the world burn without throwing himself into the flames. But then the woman raised her head, and Cole saw her eyes. They were the color of obsidian, black as midnight but shot through with flecks of gold that caught the morning sun. More than that, though, they were unafraid. Not resigned, not broken, but burning with a fierce pride that made Cole's chest tighten with something he thought the war had killed in him. Courage. She looked directly at Chief Mateo and spoke in clear, unaccented English. "Your son died a warrior's death. There is no shame in that." The chief backhanded her hard enough to snap her head sideways, hard enough to split her lip. Blood ran down her chin like scarlet tears. She smiled at him through the blood. That's when Cole's hands moved to his guns. He'd carried the twin Colts through 4 years of war and 3 years of peace, cleaning them religiously, keeping them loaded, telling himself he'd never need them again. The weight of them on his hips had become like breathing, necessary, automatic, forgotten. Until now. The first shot took Chief Mateo in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending his knife spinning into the dust. The second and third shots dropped 2 warriors before they could draw their weapons. Cole spurred Duchess down the slope, his war cry echoing off the canyon walls, the same sound he'd made leading cavalry charges against Confederate lines, the sound of a man who'd forgotten how to be afraid. The Comanche scattered like quail, some trying to mount their horses, others taking cover behind the cottonwoods. Cole rode straight through the middle of them, leaping from Duchess's back before she'd even stopped moving. His knife sliced through the woman's bonds in 2 quick strokes, catching her as she fell. "Can you ride?" he asked in Apache, his grandfather's lessons coming back like muscle memory. Her eyes widened at his use of his language. "Yes." "Then we're leaving, now."
A Comanche arrow whispered past Cole's ear, close enough to part his hair. He wrapped his arm around the woman's waist, hauling her toward Duchess, while his left hand sent 2 more shots into the warriors regrouping near their horses. The mare stood steady as granite despite the gunfire, a cavalry horse trained for battle, worth her weight in gold. "Up," Cole ordered, boosting the woman into the saddle before swinging up behind her. She fit against his chest like she'd been made for it, all lean strength and warm skin that smelled of sage and something indefinably female that made his blood sing in ways he'd forgotten. Duchess launched into a gallop without being asked, her hooves drumming against packed earth as more arrows split the air around them. Cole felt the woman tense against him, felt her hand close over his where it held the reins. Her fingers were long and elegant, calloused from work, but gentle as bird wings. "The canyon," she said, her voice steady despite the blood still trickling from her split lip. "There's a passage through the rocks. They won't follow on horseback." Cole trusted her instincts, wheeling Duchess toward the narrow gap in the canyon wall she had indicated. Behind them, Chief Mateo's roar of fury echoed off the red rocks like the cry of a wounded beast. The war chief was still alive, still dangerous. They'd made an enemy today who wouldn't stop hunting them until one of them was dead. The canyon was barely wide enough for horse and riders, the walls closing in on both sides until Cole could touch the rock with his outstretched hands. The woman guided them through turns that seemed impossible, her knowledge of the terrain saving them from dead ends and drop-offs that would have meant death. "Here," she whispered, indicating a hidden alcove behind a screen of juniper. "We can rest." Cole dismounted and helped her down, his hands spanning her waist for a moment longer than necessary. She was small compared to his 6-foot frame, but perfectly proportioned, her body promising strength and grace in equal measure. When she looked up at him, those obsidian eyes searching his face, Cole felt something shift in his chest like tectonic plates realigning. "You're bleeding," he said, reaching at the cut on her lip. She caught his wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. "As are you." Cole looked down at his shirt, surprised to see a spreading crimson stain along his ribs. One of the arrows had found its mark after all. He'd been so focused on getting her to safety that he hadn't felt the pain. "It's nothing. Nothing that will kill you slowly if infection sets in." She released his wrist, but her fingers lingered against his skin. "I know healing. My grandmother was a medicine woman." The alcove was cool and shadowy, hidden from the main canyon by the juniper screen. A small spring bubbled up from the rocks, creating a pool of clear water that reflected the narrow strip of sky visible overhead. Aiyana knelt by the water, tearing strips from the hem of her buckskin dress with efficient movements. "What's your name?" Cole asked, settling on a flat rock nearby. The adrenaline was wearing off now, leaving him shaky and more aware than he wanted to be of how beautiful she was. "Aiyana," she said, without looking up. "It means eternal blossom in my language. You speak Apache. How?" "My grandfather.
He was Jicarilla, adopted me when my parents died of fever, raised me until I was 16, then sent me to school back east. He said I needed to know both worlds to survive in either. Aiyana's hand stilled on the cloth. You are the one, the half-blood who owns the land by Dead Horse Canyon. Guilty as charged, Cole managed to grin despite the pain. Though most folks just call me crazy. Perhaps they're not wrong. But she was almost smiling as she said it, the ghost of warmth softening her features. Taking on 15 Comanche warriors alone? That goes beyond courage into madness. Couldn't let them hurt you. The words came out before Cole could stop them, raw and honest. Couldn't watch and do nothing. Their eyes met across the small space, and Cole felt the world narrow to just this moment. This woman. This sudden awareness that his life had just changed in ways he couldn't begin to understand. Aiyana's breath caught, her lips parting slightly, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words.
Instead, she moved closer, kneeling between his knees to examine his wound. Her touch was gentle but clinical as she peeled back his shirt, revealing the angry red furrow along his ribs where the arrow had grazed him. "You're fortunate," she said, her voice husky. "A few inches to the left and it would have pierced your lung." Her hands were warm against his skin, sending shivers of awareness through him that had nothing to do with pain and everything to do with how long it had been since anyone had touched him with such care. Cole forced himself to stay still, to breathe normally, to ignore the way her dark hair fell forward to brush against his chest. "Why were they holding you?" he asked, desperate for distraction. Aiyana's hands paused in their ministrations. "Chief Mateo's son led a raid against my village 3 moons ago. He killed my brother, my uncle, several others. When we tracked them down and took our revenge," she shrugged, the gesture eloquent with old pain. "Mateo wanted someone to pay for his loss. I was hunting alone when they found me. Your village will be looking for you." The words hung between them like a blade. Aiyana finished cleaning his wound in silence, her touch suddenly impersonal, professional. When she spoke, her voice was carefully neutral. "My village thinks I'm dead. I told my cousin I was going to the sacred cave to pray for my brother's spirit. The cave is 3 days' ride from where Mateo found me. They'll assume the spirits claimed me." She wrapped the cloth around his ribs with quick, efficient movements. "It's better this way." "Better?" Cole caught her hands, stilling them. Why better? For the first time since he'd found her, Aiyana's composure cracked. Her eyes filled with something that might have been tears, might have been rage. "Because I'm tired of being Princess Aiyana, daughter of Chief Nalnish, promised to a warrior who sees me as a prize to be won rather than a woman to be loved. Tired of living a life that was chosen for me before I could walk." She pulled away from him, turning to face the spring. Her shoulders were rigid with pride and pain. "Mateo did me a favor in his way. Now I'm dead to my people. Now I can choose my own path." The weight of her words settled between them like stones. Cole understood the feeling. He'd run away from his own life after the war, fled west to escape the expectations and memories that threatened to drown him. But he had a choice. Aiyana was talking about cutting herself off from everything she'd ever known, everyone she'd ever loved. "Where will you go?" he asked softly. She was quiet for so long that Cole thought she wouldn't answer. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know." The vulnerability in those 3 words hit Cole like a physical blow. This proud, fierce woman who'd faced torture without flinching was lost, adrift, as alone in the world as he was. The recognition sparked something deep in his chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. "You could—" He stopped himself before the words could escape. What was he thinking? That she'd want to stay with a broken-down ex-soldier on a hardscrabble ranch in the middle of nowhere? That a woman like her could be happy with a man like him? But she turned, those obsidian eyes searching his face with an intensity that made his heart skip. "You could stay," he said simply. With me, at the ranch.
The silence stretched between them like a held breath. Aiyana's eyes widened, and Cole saw something flicker across her face. Surprise, hope, fear, before she looked away. "You don't know me," she said finally. "I know enough." Cole reached out, cupping her chin gently to turn her face back to his. "I know you're brave. I know you're strong. I know you'd rather die than beg." His thumb traced the corner of her mouth, careful of her split lip. "And I know you're as tired of being alone as I am." She leaned into his touch for just a moment, her eyes fluttering closed. When she opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. "What kind of life could I have with you? I'm Apache. You're white, no matter what blood runs in your veins. The people in your town don't give a damn about the people in town." Cole's voice was rough with emotion. "Haven't spoken to most of them in months anyway. It would just be us, Aiyana. You and me in the desert and whatever we make of it. And when you grow tired of me, when you realize that an Indian woman brings you nothing but trouble?" The question hit him like a slap. Cole saw the real fear in her eyes now, the deep-seated certainty that she wasn't worth keeping, wasn't worth choosing. It made him want to hunt down everyone who'd ever made her feel that way and show them exactly what a cavalry saber could do in the right hands. Instead, he kissed her. It was meant to be gentle, reassuring, a promise rather than a demand. But the moment their lips met, something ignited between them that had nothing to do with comfort and everything to do with desperate need. Aiyana made a soft sound in her throat and kissed him back with a fierce hunger that told Cole he wasn't the only one who'd been alone too long. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and Cole was lost. Lost in the taste of her, wild and sweet like desert honey. Lost in the feel of her body pressed against his, all soft curves and hidden strength. Lost in the way she kissed him like she was drowning and he was air. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "Does that feel like something I'll grow tired of?" She laughed, a shaky sound that was part sob, part wonder. "It feels like the beginning of something that will destroy us both." "Maybe," Cole admitted. "But what's the alternative? You disappear into the desert, spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder for Mateo and his warriors? I go back to my ranch and drink myself to death, thinking about what might have been? We barely know each other. Then we'll learn." He captured her hands, threading their fingers together. "Aiyana, I've been dead inside for 3 years, dead to everything but duty and survival. You make me want to live again. That has to count for something." She was quiet for a long time, her thumb tracing patterns on the back of his hand. Finally, she spoke. "In my tribe, when a woman chooses her own path instead of the one chosen for her, they have a name for it. It's elinzin. It means dancing on the edge of the sky." Sounds dangerous. It is. She looked up at him, and Cole saw his own desperate hope reflected in her dark eyes. But the view must be extraordinary. They stayed in the hidden alcove until sunset, talking in the quiet way of people learning to trust. Cole told her about the war, about the men who died under his command, about the nightmares that still came on dark nights. Aiyana spoke of her life as a chief's daughter, the weight of expectations that had pressed down on her since childhood. The brother she'd loved who died trying to prove himself worthy of their father's approval. "I used to dream of flying," she said, lying beside him on a bed of pine needles as the first stars appeared overhead. "Not like a bird, but like the wind itself, free to go anywhere, touch anything, belong to no one but myself." Cole turned on his side, studying her profile in the starlight. "What stopped you?" "Fear, mostly, and love for my family, even when that love felt more like chains than comfort." She smiled sadly. My grandmother used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to dance with your fear instead of letting it lead. Smart woman. She would have liked you. She always said the best healing came from mixing medicine with story, that wounds need both herbs and hope to truly mend. Aiyana turned to face him, her fingers tracing the bandage around his ribs. What's your story, Cold Brennan? What brought you to this moment? So he told her about growing up between two worlds, never fully belonging to either, about joining the Union Army to prove his loyalty, only to discover that war made killers of everyone, regardless of their reasons for fighting, about coming west to escape the ghosts of dead friends, only to find that isolation was its own kind of death. And now? She asked softly. Now I'm hoping maybe two broken people can make something whole together. She kissed him then, soft and sweet under the desert stars, and Cole felt something in his chest that had been frozen since Gettysburg finally begin to thaw.
They rode double on Duchess through the pre-dawn darkness, taking game trails and hidden passages that Aiyana knew like the lines on her palm. Chief Mateo's warriors might be tracking them, but in this maze of canyons and mesas, they had the advantage of knowledge over numbers. The sun was painting the eastern peaks gold and crimson when Cole's ranch house came into view, a simple adobe structure that he'd built with his own hands, small but solid, with a wide porch that caught the morning light. It wasn't much, but it was honest work, honest living, and for the first time in months, Cole felt proud of what he'd built. "It's beautiful," Aiyana said softly, and Cole heard genuine admiration in her voice. "It looks like home." "Could be yours, too," he said, the words coming easier now. "If you want it." She was quiet as they approached the house, her eyes taking in the small corral where his other horses whickered a greeting, the vegetable garden he'd struggled to keep alive in the desert heat, the windmill that drew water from the deep well he'd spent weeks digging. "You built all this yourself?" "Took most of a year, working around the cattle and the crops." Cole dismounted and helped her down, his hands lingering on her waist. "Not much by some standards, but it's mine. Paid for with honest money, built with honest sweat." "It's perfect," she said, and the wonder in her voice made Cole's heart clench. "I never imagined. I've never had anything that was truly mine." "Neither had I until I came here. Everything I owned before this belonged to the army or the memory of dead men. This is the first place that's ever felt like it could hold a future instead of just ghosts." As they reached the porch, Duchess nickered softly behind them, reminding Cole that there were practical matters to attend to. But when he started to turn away, Aiyana caught his sleeve. "Cole," she said, her voice uncertain, "I don't know how to be what you need. I don't know how to be a rancher's wife or whatever you want me to be." He cupped her face in his hands, marveling at the way the morning light caught the gold flecks in her dark eyes. "I don't want you to be anything but yourself, Aiyana, the woman brave enough to spit in a war chief's face, the woman who knows every secret path through these canyons, the woman who makes me remember what it feels like to hope." She leaned into his touch, her eyes closed. "And if Mateo comes for us, then we'll face him together." Cole's voice was steady, sure. "I'm through running from fights that matter."
3 weeks passed like a dream. Aiyana moved through Cole's house, their house, like sunlight made flesh, bringing warmth to corners that had been cold for too long. She cooked Apache dishes that made his tongue sing with unfamiliar spices, taught him plant lore that his grandfather had never shared, and filled the silence that had been his only companion with laughter that made his chest ache with gratitude. At night, they lay together on the narrow bed he'd built for one, her head on his shoulder, her hair spread across his chest like dark silk. They talked until dawn, sharing stories and secrets, learning the geography of each other's hearts with the patience of people who finally had something worth taking time for. "Tell me about your first horse," she said one morning, tracing lazy patterns on his bare chest as the sun painted the adobe walls gold. Tornado. Cole smiled at the memory. Mean as a rattlesnake and twice as fast. My grandfather gave it to me when I turned 12. Said a man needed to earn his horse's respect before he could call himself a rider. Did you? Eventually. Took most of a summer and more bruises than I care to remember, but we came to an understanding. He caught her wandering hand, brought it to his lips. What about you? What was your first horse like? I never had one that was truly mine. In my tribe, horses belong to the family, to the clan. Women ride, but we don't own. Her voice was wistful. There was one mare, though. Snow white with black mane and tail. I called her Push Me, Butterfly, because she was so graceful. I used to dream that she would carry me away from everything I was expected to be. Cole pressed a kiss to her temple. What happened to her? She was part of my bride price, given to the warrior I was supposed to marry along with 20 other horses and a dozen blankets my mother spent 2 years weaving. Aiyana's voice was steady, but Cole felt the tension that crept into her body. I wonder sometimes if she misses me the way I miss her. We could find her, Cole said impulsively. After things settle, we could ride back to your territory, see if we could trade for her. Aiyana raised her head to look at him, her eyes wide with surprise and something that might have been hope. You would do that? Risk everything to reclaim a horse that might not even remember me? I'd risk everything to see you smile the way you're smiling right now. She kissed him then, fierce and grateful, and Cole thought that if this was what happiness felt like, he'd been a fool to run from it for so long. The attack came on a Tuesday morning when the desert was still cool with pre-dawn shadows. Cole was in the corral working with a young stallion when Duchess raised her head, ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring. He'd learned to trust the mare's instincts during 4 years of war. She could smell trouble before human senses knew it was coming. Aiyana, Cole called toward the house, keeping his voice calm but urgent. We have company. She appeared in the doorway like a shadow given form, her hand already on the knife at her belt. 3 weeks of peaceful mornings hadn't made her forget the skills that had kept her alive in hostile territory. How many? Cole scanned the ridgeline, counting the dust plumes rising in the distance. 20, maybe 25. Coming hard. Mateo. Her voice was flat, resigned. He's brought reinforcements. They'd known this day would come. The Comanche war chief wasn't the type to forget a slight or forgive an injury. The wound Cole had given him would have healed weeks ago, but the damage to his pride would fester until it found satisfaction in blood. The house? Cole asked, already knowing the answer. Adobe won't stop rifle bullets, and they can burn us out. Aiyana was moving as she spoke, gathering supplies with the efficient grace of someone accustomed to danger. The box canyon to the north. There's a defensive position there, high ground with only one approach. Cole nodded, his mind shifting into the cold, tactical thinking that had kept him alive through 4 years of war. How long to reach it? 10 minutes, if we ride hard. Then we'd better ride hard.
The box canyon was a natural fortress, a narrow defile that opened into a circular valley surrounded by sheer rock walls. At the back of the canyon, a jumble of boulders provided cover and commanding views of the approach. Cole had scouted it months ago, filed it away in his memory as a good place to make a last stand if the need ever arose. He'd never imagined the need would arise over a woman worth dying for. They made it with minutes to spare, Cole's horses following Duchess into the canyon like they understood the stakes. Behind them, war cries echoed off the canyon walls, Comanche voices raised in the ancient songs of battle and blood. Stay low, Cole told Aiyana as they took positions behind the largest boulder. Let them come to us. This is my fight too, she said, checking the loads in the rifle he'd given her. Mateo wants me alive, but he'll happily settle for both of us dead. The first attack came like a thunderstorm, sudden, violent, overwhelming. Comanche warriors poured into the canyon mouth with their war paint bright and their voices raised in ululating cries that made Cole's skin crawl with memory. He'd fought Indians before,
knew their tactics, their courage, their willingness to die for honor and revenge. But he'd never fought for anything more important than duty or survival. Now, he was fighting for love. His first shot dropped the lead warrior, his second scattered the charge. Beside him, Aiyana fired with calm precision, her bullets finding their marks with the skill of someone who'd grown up hunting to feed her family. The canyon filled with gun smoke and screams, the sharp crack of rifles echoing off stone walls. When the first assault broke, leaving 4 Comanche warriors dead and the rest retreating to regroup, Cole allowed himself a moment to breathe. "They'll try again," Aiyana said, reloading with steady hands. "Mateo won't leave without his revenge." "Let him come." Cole's voice was steady, sure. "I've got plenty of bullets and all the time in the world." But even as he said it, Cole knew they were running out of both. The Comanche had numbers on their side, and time, and the willingness to spend lives like water to achieve their goals. Eventually, Cole and Aiyana would run out of ammunition, or water, or luck. Unless... "I have an idea," Cole said during the lull, between the second and third attacks. "But you're not going to like it." Aiyana looked at him sharply, reading something in his voice that made her go very still. "What kind of idea?" "The kind where one of us walks out there and settles this the old way. Single combat. Winner takes all." "No!" Her voice was flat, final. "Absolutely not. Aiyana." "I said no, Cole Brennan." She turned to face him fully, her eyes blazing with fury and fear. "I won't lose you to some barbaric notion of honor. We fight together or not at all. And when we run out of bullets, when they rush us with knives and tomahawks in sheer numbers, what then?" She was quiet for a moment, staring out at the canyon mouth where Mateo's warriors were regrouping for another assault. When she spoke, her voice was soft but absolutely certain. "Then I have a better idea." Before Cole could stop her, she stood up, her hands raised in the universal gesture of parley. "Mateo," she called in Comanche, her voice carrying across the canyon, "I would speak with you." The war chief rode forward on his painted pony, his face a mask of rage and satisfaction. The shoulder wound Cole had given him was clearly healed, but the scar was visible even at a distance, a permanent reminder of his humiliation. "So," he said in accented English, "the Apache bitch finally remembers her manners." "I remember many things," Aiyana replied calmly, "including the law of single combat that governs disputes between warriors. I claim that right." Mateo laughed, a harsh sound like breaking glass. "You think to fight me, woman? You think your soft hands can hold a weapon against a Comanche war chief?" "Not me," Aiyana said, and Cole felt his heart stop. "I choose a champion, as is my right." She was invoking an old law, one that Cole remembered from his grandfather's stories. Among the Plains tribes, when a woman was accused of wrongdoing or claimed as spoils of war, she could demand trial by combat, either fighting herself or choosing a champion to fight in her name. "And who would this champion be?" Mateo asked, though his eyes had already found Cole behind the boulder. "The man who chose to save me when he could have ridden away. The man who proved that honor exists in all peoples, not just one tribe." Aiyana's voice rang with pride and something deeper, love so pure that made Cole's chest tight with wonder. "Cole Brennan, will you stand for me?" Cole rose from behind the boulder, his hands steady on his weapons. "I'll stand."
The rules were simple, ancient, understood by both cultures. Single combat, weapons of choice to the death. The winner would claim the right to leave in peace. The loser would feed the desert carrion birds. Cole chose his cavalry saber and a single Colt revolver. Mateo selected a traditional war lance and tomahawk. They met in the center of the canyon while their respective allies watched from the sides, the silence heavy with the weight of lives hanging in the balance. "You fight for a woman who will never truly be yours," Mateo said as they circled each other like wolves. "She is Apache, you are white. The desert will swallow your love like water." "Maybe," Cole replied, his saber catching the morning sun, "but at least I'll have loved her." The first clash came like lightning. Mateo's lance thrust forward with deadly precision, while Cole sidestepped and brought his saber around in a whistling arc. The war chief was fast, faster than Cole had expected, his movements fluid as water despite his bulk. The lance point grazed Cole's ribs, opening a shallow cut that matched the arrow wound from weeks before. They separated, circling again, each taking the measure of the other. Mateo was skilled, experienced, and fighting on familiar ground. But Cole had something the war chief lacked: desperation born of love, the knowledge that losing meant not just his own death, but Aiyana's return to captivity. The second exchange was more cautious, both men probing for weaknesses. Mateo's tomahawk caught Cole's saber near the hilt, the impact jarring his arm to the shoulder. Cole's return stroke drew blood from the war chief's forearm, first blood in the ancient contest. "You fight well for a white man," Mateo grudged, backing away to switch his grip on the tomahawk. "I fight well for a man in love," Cole replied, and saw something flicker in the war chief's eyes, recognition, perhaps, of a pain they both understood. The final exchange came when both men were tiring, their movements growing slower, their breathing labored in the thin mountain air. Mateo feinted with the lance, then brought the tomahawk around in a devastating arc aimed at Cole's head. Cole ducked, letting the weapon whistle over him, and drove his saber forward with all his remaining strength. The blade took Mateo just below the ribs, sliding between bones with the wet whisper of steel parting flesh. The war chief's eyes went wide with surprise, then clouded with the recognition of his own mortality. "She was worth it," he gasped, blood frothing at his lips. "Your woman, worth dying for." He fell forward, and Cole caught him, easing him to the ground with the respect due a fallen warrior. Whatever else Mateo had been, he died with courage. The Comanche warriors departed without another word, taking their chief's body with them according to their customs. The ancient law had been satisfied. Honor was restored on both sides. Cole and Aiyana were free to live their lives without looking over their shoulders for painted ponies on the horizon. They returned to the ranch as the sun was setting, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson that made the whole world look newly made. Cole's wound was shallow, already beginning to heal under Aiyana's skilled ministrations. More importantly, the deeper wounds they'd both carried, the loneliness, the sense of not belonging anywhere, were healing too. "What happens now?" Aiyana asked, as they stood on the porch, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. "Now we live," Cole said simply. "We build something worth having. We love each other the way people should love, without conditions, without reservations, without fear." She turned in his arms, her face tilted up to his in the starlight. "And if the people in town don't accept us? If they make trouble because I'm Apache and you're—" "Then we'll deal with it together." Cole kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "I'm through caring what other people think about my choices. The only opinion that matters is yours. And mine is that I love you, Cole Brennan. Love you enough to dance on the edge of the sky with you, no matter how far we might fall." He kissed her then, deep and thorough and full of promises for all the tomorrows stretching out before them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole saw his own wonder reflected in her dark eyes. "So what do we do first?" she asked, laughing softly at the hunger she could see in his face. "First, we get married, properly, legally, in front of God and the territorial judge and anyone else who wants to witness it." Cole's grin was pure mischief. "Then we start working on filling that big empty house with children who'll grow up knowing they belong to two worlds and have to apologize to neither." "Children," Aiyana repeated, wonder in her voice. "I never dared to dream." "Dream it all," Cole said fiercely. "Dream of children with your eyes and my stubborn streak. Dream of horses in the pasture and crops in the field and long winter nights by the fire. Dream of growing old together and knowing that every single day was a choice we made to love each other." She kissed him again,
softer this time, full of promises and hope and the kind of joy that comes from finding exactly where you belong in the world.